Here's an interesting survey that caught my eye. A survey of more than 10,000 Ontario high school students has found that more than a quarter of them were given the go-ahead by their parents to drink alcohol at home with friends. And that's a concern to an awful lot of people. The question, obviously, is the parents that do this, that allow this, are they being good parents by introducing their children to alcohol and drinking, quote-unquote, responsibly? Or are they sending them down a path that could lead to all kinds of problems? Let's ask Gary Dierenfeld. Gary, of course, social worker, the website yoursocialworker.com. Always some great links on there and some great stories. And always a pleasure to have Gary on the Bill Kelly Show here on CHML. Gary, thank you so much for the time. How are you doing?
I'm great. Great to be on with you again, Bill.
Yeah, well, good to have you on here. Now, your name jumped right out at me when I saw this story, and because I know that you've written about this in the past and talked about this at great length. Are they being good parents when they do this, Gary?
So we really have to drill down a little deeper and say which parents, under what circumstances, and with which kids. So even though some 25% of Ontario parents are apparently allowing underage drinking at home, if it's for a special occasion, if it's religious-based, being Jewish, we may have a blessing over the wine with our Friday night dinner. In these circumstances, we're not really seeing an increase in adolescent alcohol use or abuse, either in high school. We do see a bump up when they go to university, but it typically subsides again. If it's the kind of drinking where the parent says, well, I know you're going to drink anyways, so you may as well drink here, and or the kind of drinking where the teen says, hey, everybody else is doing it, come on, and then the parent capitulates to that. That can lead to problem drinking in the teen presently, and certainly more so when they leave the home for college or university.
Your point's well taken, because the survey here does not really stipulate whether or not this was a societal thing. You know, as you say, different ethnic groups and maybe different religious groups. There is alcohol served from time to time. I read into this that these are the teens that just where their parents, maybe it's the latter description that you articulated here, that you're saying, well, listen, they're going to be exposed to alcohol at some point. I'm going to be the one in charge to make sure that they do it this way.
Right. So that is a myth propagated by parents to at times appease themselves and appease their teens. The other interesting research statistic, Bill, about this is that those parents who are what we call permissive in terms of the alcohol consumption for the underage teen, those are parents who statistically also drink more themselves. And so the part that's hard to tease out is this teen drinking more because the parents allowed it underage, or because of the parental role model, or because of both? Where this becomes a problem is, when we look at the teen brain, it's still a brain in development. Their judgment centers, the frontal lobes, aren't fully formed. So we as an adult have learned to discriminate, hopefully, to some degree, where it's safe, where it's not safe, what to do with intoxicated, what not to do. Adolescents don't have those fully formed capacities. Where this is a great risk is, parents lock up your daughters and keep an eye on them. Approximately 75% of sexual assaults happen when the teenage girl is intoxicated beyond her ability to defend herself. So we're not blaming the victim here, but it's built in structurally. And these boys, at the same time, are also intoxicated, but they're still able to act, to perform. So we really want to be cautious about allowing underage indiscriminate drinking.
Wait, let's talk about the motivation for this, because that's an interesting area of this discussion, Gary. As you mentioned, the parents that may be permissive about this may, in fact, be those that use alcohol on a regular basis. Is that a fair assumption?
It is a fair assumption, and regular being roughly a dozen standard alcoholic beverages weekly, which is what we call moderate drinking. Moderate doesn't necessarily equal healthy or good for you. Just to be clear about that. There's some misperceptions about that word.
Well, and again, I don't want to get into stereotypes, but I mean, the Homer Simpson, the guy that gets home from work and just pounds back a couple of beers every night at 6 o'clock when he gets in, takes his shoes off and turns on the TV and grabs a couple of beers. That's considered to be moderate drinking, I guess, by that definition.
It is.
But what kind of an impact does that have on children in the house? Do they see that as same as if parents smoke? Is there a higher propensity for the children to take up the habit too?
Correct. And again, let's look at the teenage brain. The teenage brain says, "Hey, my parent is drinking a couple at night, and what harm, what foul? So maybe I can go to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 beverages, right? Because my judgment is skewed, and I always think I can do more than my parent." The other issue with drinking as little or as much, however you want to look at it, as 2 or 3 a night, typically we're fatigued, we're a little tired, we have a couple of drinks. As we're nursing our drink, we're not paying the same degree of attention to the emotional needs of our kids. We're not as responsive. We may not get off the couch to get as much done had we not been nursing the beer. So you don't need to turn into a scoundrel, and it's an equal gender opportunity. You don't need to turn into a scoundrel the result of your alcohol consumption. The problem is the alcohol consumption does interfere, though, with other aspects of family life.
What about the other angle, i.e., peer pressure? From the students that go to school with the son or the daughter, and they're the ones that are putting pressure on, like, hey, you got to try. Have you had your beer? You try this wine, etc. How do the parents respond to that? I mean, is this a discussion that parents and kids should have?
Great question. So what the research also tells us is those parents who are able to have a firm boundary and just look at their kid and say, no, you're not allowed to drink at home. As a matter of fact, you're underage. You're not allowed to drink anywhere. Now, we're not so naive as to believe the kid won't drink at all. But having said that, those parents who do give that clear, unequivocal statement, their kids are less likely to drink, and when they do drink, they're less likely to drink to the same quantity as other kids whose parents give them permission. So it really is protective of children to say no.
What about the impact? Talk to us about the psychological aspects of this, obviously, about inebriation, et cetera. But the point you just brought up about the development of the human brain is something that I think a lot of parents and people involved in these discussions in this situation might overlook or might not even consider into this. Is that it's the old idea: is that 16 or 15 or 17-year-old body able to handle alcohol?
Not nearly the same way. So think of it this way. Think of a car that doesn't have a set of brakes, so that when it comes time to stop, you just keep rolling through. That's the adolescent brain. The brakes, it's the brakes that haven't been fully developed. So when they have an impulse to do something, rather than being able to apply the brakes, and here's what happens. When we apply the brakes, it allows us to slow down, reconsider what we're doing, and then in the light of what we've reconsidered, use better judgment. In the adolescent brain, that brake is less developed. They're more likely to move forward with the impulse, not having fully thought through the consequences of the action. That puts them at greater risk. Alcohol, I'm lost for words. Give me a second. It takes away the brakes even more. Okay? So if you thought you had little brakes before, give alcohol, now you even have less brakes, less capacity to use that judgment.
The number that we saw here is about 27% of students suggested that their parents allowed them to drink at home. Interestingly, and I'm not so sure if there's a tie-in here, but I'd like to get your thoughts on this, almost that same percentage, about 22%, reported hazardous drinking among teens.
There you go. So we see this relationship between permissiveness and what we call in the social science literature heavy episodic drinking, binge drinking, right, by any other name. So again, that's where the kids don't have the off switch. They don't have the brakes. They don't just have that that sip or that one drink to enjoy, mildly the effect of the alcohol, they keep plunging forward. The degree to which they plunge forward, greater the intoxication, the greater the likelihood of harm befalling them.
So that, and there is a tie-in then, obviously. 19% of the students reported binge drinking, defined as having 5 or more drinks on any one occasion, at least once a month. So this is not just, I went and got blitzed, but boy, I'm never going to do that again. These seem to be students that are kids that are saying, I do this just about every Friday.
Correct. And again, those parents who are unequivocal say no, even knowing that the kids may go out there, and still imbibe. On average, these kids fare better with respect to less alcohol use, less frequency, and less amount overall per episode of drinking. And that's what we want at the end of the day. I'm not slamming those parents who give their children alcohol. They're typically not coming at it trying to be bad parents, but it's misinformed. They're coming at it thinking, hey, if I kind of train my kid or give my kid the experience of alcohol at home, they will be better equipped, they'll better understand appropriate alcohol use. Well, that's adult thinking, that's not adolescent thinking, and that's why it is misguided. We have to understand how the teen thinks, not the parent. The other issue that isn't much talked about is the fact that at times parents are facilitating illegal drinking. It's one thing to let your own son or daughter drink in your home. That's permissible. It's another thing if you let somebody else's kid drink in your home. That's not permissible. And so in so doing, you're actually teaching kids to flaunt the law. In so doing, let's take a look at the adolescent brain. Hey, if I can flaunt the law here with parental permission, maybe on my own judgment, I think I can flaunt the law there. So, if I take some clothes from the store without paying, if I speed, if I do other things, who cares? We're allowed to flaunt the law. The issue is not getting caught.
Well, that's an interesting aspect of this, because that 27% that you talked about right off the top that admitted that their parents allowed them to drink alcohol in the home, they said with friends, which indicates to me that, as you say, it's maybe not a religiously significant thing. It's really just, it's socializing. Mm-hmm. But as a parent, though, Gary, how do I feel if my son or daughter is out with friends and I head, oh, no, they're fine. I know they're over at so-and-so's house tonight. And then I found out that, their parents allowed them to go through a case of beer while they were there. And I'm thinking, wait a second, I didn't give my kid permission to do that, but the other parents did.
Right. So if you are going to give underage teens permission to drink in your home, I would encourage those parents to contact the parents of those other children to get permission. Otherwise, you will be legally responsible, and you still will be legally responsible for the fallout, but you'll also have to deal with the consternation of that other parent. So the other thing is, check with your home insurance carrier. Are you covered if you allow underage drinking in your home and somebody gets hurt or dies? And I don't say that to be inflammatory. These things do happen. I work with those families where there has been near tragic to tragic outcomes of underage drinking. These things do happen. We had an incident a few years back in Waterdown where a youth passed away the result of underage drinking. So parents, 'tis the season. There will be all sorts of parties. Really, does your teen need alcohol in order to have a good time? We want them to think twice about that.
And the implications, and physical and psychological, I guess, that it can have on them, too, because I know you're right, there have been stories where they have over-imbibed, and actually, you can develop alcohol poisoning. I mean, young teens have died as a result of that.
Yeah, there's, so much good research on this stuff. The other piece the parents don't realize is when their kid goes off to college or university, there is virtually a bump in alcohol consumption across those teens whose parents didn't let them drink, those teens who only let them drink with them, and those parents who let them drink with friends. There's a bump across the board. Having said that, those parents who didn't let teens drink, that bump is short-lived and not as intense. Those who only drank with their parents was a longer-lived bump in alcohol consumption and greater quantity. And those parents who allowed their children to drink with friends, those are the ones at college and university who did the worst. There was a much more sustained bump in alcohol consumption, problems with alcohol, and quantity of alcohol consumed.
As evidenced, when you start looking at orientation weeks every fall at university, and of course the trick here is because of obviously the elimination of grade 13, the students are going to university before their drinking age in many cases. So it's supposed to be dry, but there's still an awful lot of drunkenness that's going on. So it's getting in there somewhere, Gary.
Oh, it's definitely not dry. So really, if you want to be protective of your kids, if you want to let them have a drink, it should be truly with you under your supervision at a family gathering and not in the company of their friends. The other thing the literature on alcohol use and later abuse tells us, that the age of onset for the first sip, right? So how many of us have had a sip of our father's beer? But at what age did that occur? Statistically, the younger the age that occurs, and around 10 and 11 is a real pivotal time in the research, that if you're younger than 10 and 11, having had just that first sip, the greater the likelihood of an alcohol-related problem. So we even want to delay onset of that first incidental sip, at least until the person is a teen, 15, 16-ish. You know, good luck. I may be preaching to the choir. I may be preaching to the wall.
That's the plight of parents, I guess, and social workers too. The website is yoursocialworker.com. There's always some great links on there too. Gary, thank you so much for this.
So thankful.